Episode number 85 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My guest today is Adrienne Nolan-Smith. Adrienne is a board-certified patient advocate, speaker, and the founder of WellBe, a media company and lifestyle brand focused on bridging the large gap between the healthcare system and the wellness movement. Her mission is to help people prevent and reverse chronic health issues naturally. From her 20-year journey through the conventional healthcare system as a patient, caretaker, and then technology professional working with hospitals, Adrienne has seen how empowering patients through integrative health and wellness is key to preventing and reversing the chronic disease crisis. Adrienne received her BA from Johns Hopkins University and her MBA from the Kellogg School at Northwestern University. She now lives with her husband in New York City. WellBe is her greatest passion and her life's work. So welcome to the podcast, Adrienne.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's an honor to be on.
So I checked out your website. I thought it was really cool what you have on there. And I know that you have your own journey of how your health challenges and your family as well have inspired you to become a patient advocate and the founder of WellBe. I would love to hear your journey and have the listeners hear your journey as well.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to share it. It's a long one. I will try to be.
We have time.
But yeah, essentially my journey with healthcare and health, both for myself and my family, really kicked off about over 20 years ago when I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease. I was actually diagnosed at the same time as my younger brother. And I say chronic Lyme disease because there's a differentiator between the Lyme that you can catch after just when you see a tick bite or something like that, and can quickly take antibiotics when the Lyme is still, kind of new in the body, and it does actually it is effective against that. The problem is when Lyme has been in your body for long enough that it gets into all kinds of other systems and tissues and whatever, and the antibiotics seem to not be as effective. They sort of kill it, but then it comes back. So doctors call this persistent Lyme or chronic Lyme. And we had taken the standard course of antibiotics, but it had been too long. So we both continued to have symptoms. My brother much more severe than me, but it started my mother on this 2-year journey of trying to get us better. And we did many different integrative and natural therapies, which today have a lot more research behind them and are more mainstream, but at that point in the mid 90s certainly wasn't, and also were a lot harder to find because we were, this was kind of pre-internet. I mean, there was like Netscape, you couldn't really search for things the way that you can today. And so, we did all these different treatments, and about 2 years later, my symptoms subsided. So, my Lyme went into remission. And I felt very fortunate. My younger brother it took a lot longer. I think Lyme has affected his entire life. He was taken out of school. It was a process, but he was like a functioning kid and able to play sports and go to school and stuff like that by the time he was, in his, let's say like 17 years old or so. So it was a while for him. But the point was that was my introduction into this world of integrative and natural medicine when the conventional system didn't have answers for us. And fast forward from age 13 to 18, my health was fine. I was a normal high school student. And it wasn't until I got to college, about 6 months after I got to college, I stopped getting my period. And I had 2 years of amenorrhea following that. And about a year in, I started to get really worried about what that meant, because my period had come, normally every, 28 to 32 days since I was, I think I had just turned, I was like a few weeks away from turning 13 when I first got it. So let's say it had been, 5 years of no issues, totally normal, and then gone for 2 years. And so I started to see doctors at both Johns Hopkins, where I was in college, and then also home in New York, where I'm from. And, some of the top, endocrinologists and gynecologists and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't yet have that feeling that, the Lyme experience really showed me that just because somebody has a white coat doesn't necessarily mean that they want to help you heal or have all the answers. So I was still like sort of worshiping the conventional system, like, oh, they have the answers, they must know. So, got into all these fancy doctors, and all of them had the same answer for me, which was, we can't see anything wrong with you in your blood work. You have, nothing, we can't tell really what happened here. But we'll just give you the birth control pill, and that'll be that.
I had the same thing.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of women have had the same experience. And I really credit my mother as well as the Lyme experience for changing me from just a normal girl looking for answers, feeling, like, okay, sure, whatever you say, not empowered, to a very empowered, very research intense person who did a lot of my own research and brought a lot to these doctors to say, absolutely not. From what I can see, the birth control pill has loads of side effects. Why would I want to trick my body every day? Why would I want to cover up these symptoms? Not getting my period is my body's way of saving me from having a baby, because things are not right in my body.
Right.
So if things are not right in my body, why aren't they not right in my body? I would like to fix them. I'm only 19 years old. I have a whole life ahead of me. I would like to fix them now. I'm happy to do the work, whatever it takes. And they were just kind of like, get out of my office. I have no other solutions for you. If you're not into this one, good luck. So, I went back to my integrative medicine roots and found a holistic nutritionist, actually, that had helped somebody my father knew in New York with the same issue. So I started working with her, and what she did with me, I mean, the way that she looked at my blood work and how long we went over it together and how she connected the dots between all these different things that had happened to me, from studying abroad in China and taking too much Cipro and that affecting my gut, and then my diet changing drastically from eating very, very clean at home, because my mom had learned so much about food during our Lyme process and how much it affects health. So we ate annoyingly clean, like, nobody would eat at our house kind of clean, to then eating in a cafeteria 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. And, all the unhealthiness that comes with being a freshman in college, and living in the dorms. So it took 6 months for my body to be like, no more, we cannot handle this. And it was very interesting to see the food side, the antibiotic, use, too much antibiotic use side of it, as well as my thyroid issue, which had never been diagnosed. And like all of these things coming together to basically my body saying, no, this is not a good vessel to breed.
Yeah.
we need to
literally
step back.
I mean, that's what happens.
Exactly. And it's actually a beautiful thing, because your body is like, whoa, I don't want to miscarry. I don't want to bring a child that has a lot of health issues into the world. This person is clearly under distress in some way. So let's step back from reproduction and let them heal. Which I'm sure people who are struggling with fertility don't like to hear, but it's also, I think, when you accept that your body is working with you instead of against you, the healing process can be accelerated, I think. So fast forward, I worked with this woman for 6 months with just an herbal diet protocol and occasional acupuncture, and herbs and supplements. I took loads of supplements and Chinese herbs, and also, changed my diet pretty drastically. And she said, do this for 6 months and it'll come back. And sure enough, 6 months and a day later, it did.
Wow. That's cool.
And it's been completely normal ever since I was like 20 years old. So, you know, that was like strike two of my health journey that kind of showed me like, all the people who are supposed to know how to help me don't.
Yeah.
And also, if I hadn't done my own research, I might be on that pill for a while. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I should caveat by saying several of the doctors told me, oh, this is not indefinite. You just have to go on the pill to jumpstart your period. That's what they kept saying. So I finally indulged one of those doctors and went on for 3 months to jumpstart it. And sure enough, it was like another 6 months of not having it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to show them like, no, that's not
Right.
an actual solution, but I entertained the idea. So, you know, the biggest thing that's happened to me and the reason that I became a patient advocate and founded WellBe actually happened after both of those health issues and related more to my mother. She was diagnosed with a schizoaffective disorder, which is a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar. Essentially, it's just a collection of symptoms. They don't really know what that means. You know,
Right. They just call it that. Yeah.
right. It's like, this person has these symptoms and we don't know what that means, so we'll call it this term. It's like irritable bowel syndrome. Like, okay, what is irritating your bowel?
Exactly.
Or restless leg syndrome. There's a couple that are kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
But she was diagnosed following a major manic episode that happened actually with me and my two brothers, where we had to chase her through the New York City subway system, and she thought we were trying to kill her and like all this insanity. And finally we had no experience with mental illness in this way. We didn't know what to do. And we just called the cops, and had her taken away to a mental health facility in the middle of the night because she wouldn't stop running away from us.
Oh, that
And
must have been so hard. I can't even imagine.
it was like probably the most surreal thing that I've ever done. Like just standing on the street corner with my brother,
Oh,
holding her in like a human straitjacket, and then
horrible.
cops, and then she leaves, and we're like, whoa, like what
Yeah.
just happened? And also what's going to happen next? And
Right.
what happened next was like 3+ years of horrible tragedy, in and out of different mental health hospitals and facilities, and outpatient, inpatient, so many drugs. I mean, they just drug the heck out of you in this scenario. And, you know, once you're on these drugs, they're incredibly powerful. They have so many side effects, that, you know, her quality of life changed dramatically. I mean, she was drooling all the time, shaking, sleep was an issue, weight, thirst, like
Oh,
you name it. And so much depression too, because you feel disabled.
yeah.
Um, so, you know, and some of these drugs also have suicidal ideations as a side effect.
Right.
And so she ended up taking her life when I was
Oh,
25.
yeah.
Uh,
So sorry.
and yeah, no, I mention it only because, and thank you, because this was like this pivotal moment in my life where I had been applying to go to business school and actually really wasn't sure why I was applying. I was kind of trying, I had a good job at IBM, but it was not fulfilling. And I knew I wanted to change, but I didn't know what else I wanted to do. And it never occurred to me to work in health and wellness. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be, you know, when I first graduated from college, I wanted to be an international journalist, like, you know, all these different things. And I finally, as I was applying, realized that my mission really had to be to work to fix this healthcare system
Yeah.
and to help people to see that there is another way, that the conventional system, it's amazing for emergency medicine, but it doesn't really fit for chronic health conditions to actually heal them,
Yeah.
because their tools, which are, you know, really just drugs and surgery and radiation, are for like, they're like blunt force trauma, you know, they're
Right. Right.
like a nuclear warhead.
Yeah.
But they don't address the root cause of why these things are happening. And when you never address the root cause, these things continue to get worse. And
Correct.
then you throw on top of that
That's
side
right.
effects.
Yes.
So it's really a tragedy, because we took this most amazing thing that happened not even 100 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the onset of the discovery of penicillin and antibiotics,
Right.
that could save so many lives, and then tried to force it into these lifestyle diseases, which are coming from our environmental toxicity, our food, our devices, our, stress, all of that. And it's like trying to fit, a square, whatever it is, into a round peg,
Yeah.
whatever the phrase is. So I saw this and I just saw, wow, people need to know that there is a different way to approach chronic illness and chronic health issues, and that getting to the root cause, they deserve that. That should be medicine. That should be the standard of care. And it's not even close. Whether it's mental health or physical health, or usually it's a combination of the two, right? So that's really been my mission since 2011, when I first got into business school, and I ended up moving to Chicago and going to Northwestern University. Kellogg is the name of the business school. And the whole time I was there, I tried to talk to anybody that I could about integrative medicine, wellness, functional medicine, the issues with the healthcare system. And there was like nobody who wanted to talk about that, especially in Chicago. It just wasn't like a hot spot for that. And I mean, this was before really Instagram. So was, I think Instagram started in like 2012, and people only, didn't use captions. So there was no community, no sense of where people were connecting on this topic. It was really just practitioners, who, I could speak to about it, but nobody thinking about like the larger problem, and also thinking about business and things like that. So I started to, I started WellBe actually, which is what I do now, in a slightly different form, in a class at business school with a team of engineers. And by the time I graduated, I was just like, I need some money. And also, I'm not sure this is the right time for me to be an entrepreneur. And also, I didn't feel like it was the right time for the conversation. It felt still too alternative medicine, like woo-woo, hippie, weirdo stuff. And I was like, look, my family, I'm not a hippie. Like, my family couldn't be more conservative. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. It's really about the medicine.
Right. It's a perception.
Right.
Anything new, I find that people have a lot of resistance to. It's just human nature.
Yeah. And it's like, or it's been stigmatized for so long that it's easy to write off as this like counterculture, like woo, like people that are into that are also conspiracy theorists and don't, believe in anything. And
well, think about it this way. I mean, there's so many ulterior motives going on at the same time when it comes to the system. I mean, there's companies that spend tons of money trying to disprove anything that goes against their pharmaceuticals. It is what it is. I mean, this is kind of what we're up against.
oh yeah, interest, the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare industry, because it's a fee for service system, to make sure that people continue to need service, i.e. continue to have chronic health issues and need drugs and need surgery and need hospitalizations, and you need to fill beds. I mean, it is a business. And the sad part is the chief executives are responsible for filling those beds and getting that revenue.
It is.
And if the revenue doesn't come in, the board throws them out. So
and then there's this whole insurance thing where the insurance will only pay for certain things like surgeries. And it's insane. I've heard so many things, even from other doctors. I've talked to Christiane Northrup. She was talking about how at one point they said, well, you need to do more surgeries. What do you mean you need to do more surgeries? If there's no surgeries that are needed, why would I need to do more surgeries?
Oh, yeah, I remember going, right. I went to the Integrative Healthcare Symposium this past February in New York City, and I remember hearing Mimi, I think her name is Guarini. She's an MD. She's really influential in the integrative health world and really good speaker. And she's a cardiologist, and she was joking / not joking about how her hospital admitting privileges had been taken away, and how when she called to say like, why? Like, I'm a cardiologist. Like, I need to be able to admit people to the hospital if they're having like a heart attack, And they were like, well, you just never sent any patients, so we took them away. What? And she's like, well, isn't that a good thing? Like, that's shouldn't you be happy that I am not sending you patients because they're not having heart attacks because I teach them how to eat? But I said, should still be able to, in case that happens. You shouldn't take that away from me because I'm doing a good job with my patients. It was
Yeah,
like a very
it is.
perverse.
It's really crazy. It is a crazy system, and it's hard. Well, my husband's an ER doctor, and I always tell him
Oh
like,
my God.
you do the best of what Western medicine is. I mean, really, it's the creme de la creme is the ER. The
Right.
technology, as an acupuncturist, I can't help anybody with an emergency. So that's really the creme de la creme. I mean, that's their strong suit, and I think that that's why they should work together, and there should be an integration.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's
Yeah.
not, unfortunately, and it's tough because, like, on the one hand, I don't want to sound negative all the time, but it is what it is. Sometimes bringing up truth, of what it is, there are things that people should know about, which I
Oh
think
yeah.
is so
And
important.
right. And yeah, it's, to me, my perspective has not changed at all in that there's a time and a place
Hmm.
for conventional Western healthcare, and that is emergency medicine.
Yeah.
And maybe a handful of tiny, as far as a percentage of healthcare issues for a whole population, these rare genetic things that people are born with that are
Or
just,
certain surgeries for certain severe cancers, or there's
right,
certain specialties,
exactly.
of
Like,
course,
but I
but things
would
like that.
consider that emergency medicine. If you have like
Yeah.
a tumor growing inside you
Right.
that's possibly spreading every day, like get
Yeah.
that thing out,
Right.
that makes
Right.
sense to me. But yeah, it's just something that we were so enamored with because it was so life-saving, and we tried
Hmm.
to put it into this other
Yeah.
category of health issues, which is actually the majority of our health issues at this point, and it
What's
just doesn't work.
crazy is that we've forgotten how to eat. I mean, that's like so basic. We
Oh
have
yeah.
food, and food has certain therapeutic effects on the body. And it's crazy because you ask certain doctors, they don't know anything about diet.
Oh yeah. No,
It's
I
insane.
think it's like less than 4 or 5 hours of required nutritional coursework over 4 years of medical
Yeah.
school, or most of it is optional, sort of electives that people don't attend. So it's actually really unfair of us to ask conventional physicians questions about nutrition because they're not equipped.
Right.
They do not have the training, but they'll sort of try to act like they do.
Hmm.
uh, and there's like this, it doesn't matter, and that's what people do when they don't have the answers.
Right.
So my thought is like, why are we even putting them in the position of asking them, because they don't have the answers.
Right.
They weren't taught that. That's not, and some very good doctors will say, honestly, I don't know enough on this topic, but I have a
Yeah.
nutrition professional that I can refer you to. But a lot of other ones are just like, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So there's that. But I guess we sort of digress a little bit. So yeah, when I finally, I ended up working after business school in the healthcare system. I worked with hospitals doing chronic disease management, which was pretty wild because everything that I thought was wrong with the system as far as chronic disease, I got to see up close and personal, and saw that, yes, in fact, it is just as broken as I suspected in all these different ways that I now knew about. So I gained a lot of um, knowledge about the conventional system because I was in a hospital like every week, which, proved to be helpful when I sat for the board exam to become a patient advocate after I had left my job to found WellBe. And I had all this medical knowledge that I was then able to use to become a patient advocate. But I left because I always wanted to go back to WellBe. And I knew that I would at some point, because I knew that for real societal change to happen, you have to start with information and inspiration.
Hmm.
Just that is what begins the journey for people. Every single person a lot of times it starts with listening to a podcast like this, or watching a particular documentary, or reading something about something you might have been experiencing and realizing how connected it is to these other things, and starting to go down that rabbit hole of understanding how connected everything is in our whole body and how most of it leads back to food. And all of that I knew had to be, in order for change to happen, had to start. So that's when I started my website, weekly newsletter. The podcast came a year later, but all of my social channels and stuff like that. And a little while later, my patient advocacy private consulting work started, where I actually take people through when they're trying to figure out a health issue, or they know they have one and they're like, I've been to 7 doctors. They all just want to give me this drug and that drug, and they're telling me I need this surgery. And like, I don't know. And I just want to actually heal it. I want to get to the bottom of it and fix it and be done with it. And, you know, the other side of medicine, functional, integrative, holistic, whatever you want to call it, can be pretty expensive. And most of it is out of pocket. So, because of the insurance system. So, I sort of guide people to figure out, okay, who do you actually need to see? Who has availability? What are their pricing options? Do they take your insurance? Like, what is really going on with you, so that I can get you to the right place? Because a lot of times people are like, oh, I have migraines, so I went to a neurologist. Well, your migraines could be a hormonal imbalance, could be celiac
Right.
disease, could be so many things.
Yeah.
And it's just a symptom.
Right.
The fact that it's coming out in your head has nothing to do with that. They might take an MRI and like, they're not going to see anything, you know, for the most part. So that's kind of interesting. A lot of people aren't used to realizing that just because, oh, they have cold hands and feet, so they went to somebody about their hands. Well, no, that has nothing. That's likely a thyroid thing or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So you have to kind of understand how things connect to then be able to get yourself to the right person. And a lot of people just don't have that knowledge, or haven't seen a lot of that research and stuff. So I help people with that, as well as like I have a larger online program about all the stuff that is needed to actually prevent the chronic health issues that we have today. So that kind of takes people through all the steps of cleaning up their personal care products and their food and their sleep and all of that. Because I see it's really from both sides. You know, I see people when they're already sick, but I know it's much easier to prevent this stuff before it gets to the point where it's an illness than it is to try to reverse an illness. So I try to like work with my audience on both sides, because I can see, as you said, with, you know, food being medicine, the 100 choices that you make a day are truly your healthcare. That's really it. Like 99% of your health care is what you do for yourself. And then there's like an annual checkup or something like that, you know? So once you get to the point of annual checkup, if things aren't going in the right direction, like checkups can't, you know, that's not going to change the behavior or the outcome. It's you that has to do that. So I really try to help people to make the changes in their own homes and lives now, to get the stuff out that would be making them sick in the long term, or maybe even is now. And then also try to get people to help when they're really in a tough place further down the line. So that's my whole journey. It's been a wild one, but it's also super, super rewarding.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it's totally, we also in Chinese medicine, we treat the person. That's the whole thing, is we treat the person, not the symptom. Because 10 different people can have the same exact symptom for 10 different reasons. So,
like fatigue.
Yeah.
There's like 1,000 things that could cause fatigue. You know, it's wild to me that, or even, you know, like I said, migraines or your hair falling out can be a couple of different things. Like, it's just a really interesting puzzle if you think about it like that.
Exactly. And we are a puzzle. And what's interesting is once you start to pay attention, your body will give you clues. And and it's for the layperson as well. It's something that you will start to notice. If you're eating certain foods, you'll start to feel a certain way. It's just about bringing that awareness. We have a lot more power in understanding that than I think we realize. And I think a lot of people have gone through this, like you, on their own, just figuring it out and saying, wait, something's not right. And this like intuition within yourself saying something's not right about this, and something's not right about what this doctor is telling me. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And also, I mean, wearing my patient advocate hat, I just tell people constantly, you are the CEO of your body.
Yeah.
A doctor is a potential partner, right?
Right.
It's somebody that you're allowing to potentially give their opinion, but you ultimately have to understand enough about what's going on with you, both your symptoms and some of the possible root causes, and take the different opinions about what you can do and
Mhm.
really weigh all the cost benefits and like listen to your gut about what you think is the right thing to do. You do not have to jump into just because one doctor says take this drug, like,
Right.
okay, yes,
Yeah.
understand the drug, understand the other options before jumping into a surgery or a drug, because a lot of times once you go down that road, it's very hard to get off that road.
True. Yeah.
And perhaps other side effects now, come out of that. I have a
Right.
friend who had an elective hip surgery about 2 years ago and has now had 3 more surgeries.
Mhm.
Has now torn the meniscus in her knee because the rods in her hip are so immobile that it caused another place to, you know, have an issue.
Right.
And I just think, gosh, if she had just explored a few more options before that first surgery, where might she be now?
Right. And I think it really comes down to going to these authority figures, which has such a psychological impact, just the way we perceive doctors, and thinking that that is really the ultimate, because you're coming in the face of like such certainty. They have such certainty about what they're saying
Right.
and such conviction that this is the only way, and you believe it.
Oh yeah.
You don't
Yeah. I
think that
mean,
you have an option.
I was filming an interview with somebody, a doctor actually, who now, is doesn't treat with, she was a psychiatrist who doesn't even treat with drugs anymore. And she said, the modern or Western or conventional healthcare system has all the trappings of religion.
Mm,
We have the hallowed halls of medicine. Like, it all looks very different from all of our other establishments. With the hospital, it's just a very different place, and a lot of the medical offices with the diplomas on the wall, and it just
mhm,
feels like some sort of academic, very like esteemed situation. And then we have them all in white coats, even doctors who don't need to be wearing white
mhm.
coats. So
Right.
it's like the priest with the
Yeah.
outfit, and like it has this feeling of authority, ritual,
Yeah.
like, I am the lowly patient, you have all the power, all the things. So it's very interesting how our cultural um evolution in this has played a part in what's happened with our health outcomes as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because there's one thing that really pisses me off. I try not to get pissed off, but this one thing pisses me off. And I think that that happens pretty much when you're very passionate about anything. I think there's going to be something about the system that you see that like really pisses you off. For me, I also studied hypnotherapy because I believe the mind is so important, and how we see ourselves and how we see or visualize and believe in what's going to happen in our health and wellness or future. So for me, that is like gold, to be able to believe for women going through fertility journeys that they can actually get pregnant. And so what really pisses me off is when they go to the doctors, and I've seen it happen so many times. I've heard stories, and doctors say, your eggs are too old. There's no way you can get pregnant on your own. Just horrible, horrible things to just deflate their hopes and dreams and just
Yeah.
like take it away from them. And I've seen these same exact women after coming to my office, and I'm not taking credit for it. It's really their bodies getting to a place also of hope and belief, and doing herbs. And pretty much, what we do is we just get the body in balance so the body can heal itself. It's really the body that could take the credit.
Right.
So, you know, and they get pregnant on their own without anything. And sometimes I say, if you're in touch with that doctor, feel free to tell them, listen, please don't say this to other people, because it's not true for me. And it can also really harm people's future. I mean, it's just, so yeah, that really, it definitely gets to me because I know how harmful it is. And even with me, I feel like, when I get the patients, I almost have to undo that hex, you
Yeah.
know. And so what would you say to somebody going through this and going to the reproductive endocrinologist, which I think has a place to take labs and see what's going on, internally, you know, want to make sure that the tubes are clear and everything's okay and that there's not any underlying reproductive condition. So it does have a place, and it's important for women to go to the reproductive endocrinologist to get a baseline, I do think. However, you almost have to protect yourself too and shield yourself from some negativity, possibly, because there are some great reproductive endocrinologists that are a little bit more positive and more open-minded and work with acupuncturists, or, you know, but not everybody's that way.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, I do a lot of like going to certain doctors to get certain kinds of tests. And then I know that I'm just taking what they say as a possible opinion, but have no means of acting on that at that time. I'm going to go consider a lot of different things, put together the research, and think about what's best for me. So I will just say that to most doctors if I go to a conventional doctor because I want some testing like you were talking about. When they start give me their like, okay, here's what you should do next, I'm like, okay, no, thank you so much for giving me that information and your opinion about the next course of treatment. I'm going to weigh all of my options and I'll let you know if I'd like to proceed with what you're recommending.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever, any doctor I've said that to, they say, fine, they're not offended. It's respectful.
Right.
But it's just like, I'm in control. I need a little time to think about this. I'm not ready to take what you're telling me as, the word of God. Nor do I want to rush into anything. Unless you are, in need of emergency medicine, there's no reason to rush these decisions. I mean, you need to make a decision, eventually, if it's something that, you can't drag your feet forever, if it's something that you need to deal with. But I think taking a few days, doing thorough research, even a few weeks, and then making a very thoughtful decision about what to pursue is the way that you can be empowered in your health and not give your power away right away because one person suggested one thing. Even within conventional medicine, there are so many doctors with different knowledge sets, things they've learned, things they've researched outside of their practice, conferences they went to, things they heard, things they stumbled upon in PubMed. There's no to say like any given endocrinologist knows the same things about my options. It's completely untrue. So you even could, you could get a few opinions within the conventional system, but I really recommend getting opinions that have different schools of thoughts about holistic root cause driven ways to approach the issue, because if you never address the real root cause, and a root cause is not a blanket condition name that just is like, oh, well, I don't know why you have fibromyalgia. You just have it. That's not a root cause. Root cause is understanding.
That means I don't know.
That means I don't know. I have phantom pain. I don't know why. Anything like that is not a root cause, and really getting to the root of it. And even if that has a genetic component, our genes are turned on, right? Our genetic markers, the ones that are negative that carry disease, they are turned on by our environment and our lifestyle. So just even if somebody says like, oh, you've always, your parents had thyroid conditions, you're always going to have a thyroid condition or something, that's okay. That means you're starting further back than somebody else in the race, but that does not mean that you need to live your whole life with a thyroid condition, or you can make it better. You can by what you do every single day. So I hate that kind of like, oh, well, it's genetic, like literally nothing I can do about it, throw away my power in the situation. And it's just simply not true. There's so much you can do even when you are genetically predisposed to something. You need your diet, lifestyle, environmental, exposures, all of that can either turn on or off that biomarker. And it should be very empowering. I think for some people it's scary because it means they actually have to change things about their lives and do something with that information. But it can also be very empowering.
It is. I agree. It's a choice. We're kind of given that choice, but a lot of people don't realize they have that choice. And that's really what it is. And it's even, I'm okay with doctors suggesting things. I just don't like when they say, this is what's going to happen to you.
Oh, and, no, that's not their, that's
not their place.
No.
And they don't know. Like, how do they know? How do they know?
They could say this is a possibility, or, for example, like a late stage, again, this is more in the emergency medicine side, not what we're talking about, but like cancer, if somebody's in late, stage 4 cancer, even then, I think doctors have a responsibility to say there is a 10% chance that you die within a year. Not it's likely that you're going to die within a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like even that just helps people to see, okay, so there's a
Actually,
10.
there's been studies on that. There's been studies on that where they found, Dr. Joe Dispenza talks a lot about that. They found that some people had a cancer for a lot longer, and then once they get diagnosed and once they know about it and once they're told what that means, they die a lot quicker.
Yeah, I mean, the mind is so incredibly
Yeah.
powerful, and it's that loss of hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's that loss of belief, right? Because if you're, how I understand it from the various mental health professionals that I've interviewed for WellBe, is that your body and your brain is trying to make what it believes to be the actual reality. So
Mm-hmm.
if you believe that you are going to die, it will find every way
It's true.
to make that true in the world, which means
Yeah,
you will die.
that's right.
Whereas if the belief is I'm going to live, it's continuously working to make that the reality.
That's right.
So it's a very interesting thing. It's like looking for validation. It's trying to. What it doesn't like is when you believe something and it goes out into the world and it's a different thing from what you believe. It's like, oh no, we need to make this the truth.
Right.
So if you can make your beliefs positive, then what's happening, your body is trying to make positive things come to light, which is
It's
pretty
true.
cool.
It is.
Uh,
It's so cool.
so yeah, I see that, as I'm sure you do, with recovery of any kind from chronic health issues or the process of getting pregnant. The belief system plays a huge role in whether that comes to fruition. And of course, things happen where somebody believes and believes and believes and it doesn't happen. That's
It's
possible, but
true.
it's a game of statistics.
It is. It
Um,
is exactly. It's for the most part, it does help, and that's why I feel like it's such a sin to take that hope away from anybody.
yeah, I mean, and also, why would you? Like, why wouldn't you? I think it's there's no reason to take hope away from somebody when it is possible.
Yeah.
That
Unless, it means that they're going to go with them and do
Oh,
reproductive and,
right. Yes, the
I mean that,
economics do drive some of this. Yes,
yeah.
that's true.
I mean, and not to say that that's the only reason. A lot of it's ego. Just I
Yeah,
know, and I've seen this, and this is what it is, and I know more than you do. I know more than anybody does, and a lot of it's ego. A lot of it's also ignorance.
yeah,
There's so many
yeah,
different.
yeah. It's a lot about training. What's normal when they were coming up in the medical school system? What other doctors were doing that they trained with? You
Hmm.
know, if they were trained with a massive narcissistic ego maniac,
Yeah,
they'll probably adopt a lot of that same behavior and language too. So uh, that's why I think the more we can do to change how physicians operate now, and that's all driven by consumer demand. I really believe that when
that's right.
patients and consumers, all the same to me, voice that they want different kinds of doctors or go with better kinds of doctors, and
Hmm.
let those doctors who weren't behaving properly know that's why I'm not working with you anymore.
That's right.
It starts to change the system to the
Hmm.
point where then those doctors are mentoring other doctors for the good
Hmm.
ones.
Right.
And those behaviors carry on, generation after generation. So I think we're in a really important time of transformation, but there are very strong economic incentives to keep it just the way it is.
Hmm.
So it takes a lot of people speaking out, and bringing good information, not fear mongering or anything like that, but good information to help patients and consumers make different choices and feel empowered in their health.
Look at the organic industry. I mean, it's a lot bigger now than it used to be, and it used to be a lot more
Yeah.
expensive. It was only a certain amount of people that can afford it, and now the demand came from the people for things like Dr. Oz and all these different shows that talked about how important it is to eat organic, and also the fact that we have the internet now, and it's like articles and informing so many people on the benefits of eating organic. And because of that, people demanded it more. And
Yeah.
therefore, more companies began offering it.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's just a great example of how something can transform from a small niche, you know, mission or interest to something that went pretty mainstream. I think Costco is now the largest provider of organic food in the country, which is awesome.
It's
Uh,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, and it's also, there was a lot of food activism to show that the food subsidies that the government gives to um, soy and corn farmers and these other things that were heavily genetically modified was a big part of the problem because it made the cost so out of whack. So if you weren't providing all these food subsidies for the cheap, crappy stuff, then perhaps it would be just a little bit more and people would make that decision instead of feeling like it was 50% more or something like that. So, I mean, there's been people were really like watchdogs about this stuff, and these subsidies still exist. That hasn't changed. But I think the attention and revelation of information to normal taxpayers who had no idea this was all going on is great for
Yeah.
making the change happen, because they're kind of like, wait, what?
Because ultimately the power is in people. They're the ones holding their wallets and,
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. There's like the power is in the people in two ways. One is their wallets, and the other way is like what they vote for, who they vote for. But I would say the wallet is way more powerful because companies react so much faster than governments.
That's
So
true.
if you go to the store and buy organic food and you used to not, that's like an instant sign to them to go further in that direction.
Yeah.
And they will, because they want your money. They want you to be a customer. So they'll meet your demand. So I think the wallet is so important. And I get a little too into this, but like I will not buy anything from a company that, even if they, or I shouldn't say anything, who knows, maybe I'll do something at some point and it's really linked to some bad company. But my point is, I even don't like to get like a Dasani water, for example, because Pepsi owns it, if I
Right.
can help it, right?
Yeah.
Or things like that where it's like, oh, come on, that's not connected. But in a way it is. And
Yeah.
if my dollar is my
I don't
vote,
even like the way it tastes.
oh, I think it tastes terrible. It's also like low pH, like but um, the vote, when you think of your dollar as your vote, you'll make really different decisions. I think with every little thing that's like, oh, it's no big deal, it could be a big deal.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So, as far as fertility challenges go, take us through how you would help women going through this whole journey. Like what are the kind of things that you basically empower them? What are the kind of tools that you give your clients?
Yeah. So
Trying to figure out what's going on with their bodies, like, and they get like unexplained infertility, for example.
yeah, great question. So the first thing to understand is what is going on in your body. And the second thing that I really stress when I work privately with people is the mindset too. Like you said, instilling the belief that this is possible, not being angry at your body because you think of it as failing you, but rather thanking it for, protecting you from potentially having a miscarriage or things like that because things aren't right. And then just becoming an incredible investigator. I help bring research in and listen to different symptoms that people have and things they've gone through to try to connect the dots about how those could potentially be connected, and all related to the same health issue, because they usually are. And then try to get them to people who can do testing on things that relate to the root cause. So not just testing to show you what your levels are, like an reproductive endocrinologist, but also more on the functional side to see, do you have mold toxicity?
Right.
Do you have toxic metals? Do you have, extremely low vitamin D? Do you have a thyroid condition like Hashimoto's? Do you have parasites? Do you have terrible gut health or leaky gut syndrome or whatever? All of these things are creating an environment in your body in which it is not safe to reproduce. So or do you have celiac? Like there's so many different things, or even, less severe food sensitivities and things like that, where you can do great investigative work to pull some of these things out, across all the categories that I mentioned. Maybe you're exposing yourself to phthalates every day. That messes with your endocrine system. There's so many.
Right.
So can you and this is where kind of my online program comes into, is like, can you make these changes so that you prepare your body, you have a clean slate, you're eating well, you've hopefully fixed any sort of underlying gut issues, toxicity issues, all of that. And it might take a couple months of hard work to do that. But then when you finally have a clean slate and you're maybe still not getting pregnant, okay, maybe then it's actually, you don't have any more eggs left or this or that or whatever, or you have energy blockages. And I have seen such success with fertility and acupuncture for sure. But then let's talk about this actually being a reality that you have a fertility problem, because until you fixed all these other things, to me, you have a health problem. That one of the symptoms is that you're not getting pregnant.
That's such a good way to put it. I really love, I love the perspective of that. And I also love the perspective of thanking your body.
Yeah.
For
I mean,
this awareness.
Yeah, I heard, a great doctor that I interviewed who is an MD say, your body is your ally, not your enemy, even when you're sick. Like you gotta, it does incredible things for you every day. And all it's asking from you is just to give it some good inputs, nourishing inputs, and not toxic inputs, and it will continue to perform amazingly. So when it's not performing well, it's because you're not often doing your part, or something in your environment has caused, it could be, somewhat out of your control, like a horrible trauma, or you're living in a house with mold, whatever, but then it's also in your power to figure that out.
Right.
So it's not just about your daily behavior. It's also about your investigative skills. Like that's where you got to come in and do the work. Your body is like, be my detective, figure out who murdered me, like I want to know.
And you can be, it's amazing. That's the thing. Like, I think that people assume that you need a professional for this, and you do for a lot of things, but you can get so much by just becoming aware.
Oh yeah, it's a dual part process. I do believe that testing, especially like functional medicine testing, is really helpful to understand if you have genetic mutations that are playing a role, if you have really low nutrient levels that's playing a role, if you have, like I said, random like heavy metals that are playing a role, which you would never know. Actually, there are some symptoms of like having mercury poisoning, things like that, but often it's hard to know without a test. So I think that's really important. But then the other piece of it, or I guess there's three pieces: the testing that looks at some of these root cause things, the mindset, which we talked about, and then the third piece is making sure that you are hyper aware and doing everything you can to clean up your home and your body to make it a place where a baby could actually thrive.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people that I've seen going through this are actually so thankful after the fact. It's always after the fact. During the time they're kicking and screaming, but like usually after the fact, realizing, wow, like my body feels so much better. I feel so much better. I feel more clear-headed and ultimately healthier to provide a place of growth for the child. And also, once they have the children, they're a lot more educated on how to feed them and how to raise, it's just on so many levels.
Yeah. I mean, I think in some ways, I know women do not like to hear this because it's so horrible as they're going through it, and time is of the essence, but a lot of times a fertility challenge can be the only thing that helped them to realize they had an underlying health issue.
Yeah, it's right.
Or several. And if they had
thyroid, I mean, so many.
Right. And if they hadn't been going through it, they might have gone another decade or two or a lifetime until they're in their 60s, and then they have all these chronic diseases because they never dealt with these things when they could have in their 20s and 30s, maybe when they were trying to conceive. So, if you can think about it like a blessing that turned you on to these issues, then that'll help too, because that's sort of giving your body that thanks, that acceptance, that not acceptance is the wrong word, that gratitude and, kind of partnership. Like
Yeah.
we're in this together. You're not
Right.
against me.
The voice. Yeah. You give
Yeah.
your body
Like
a voice.
we're going to get through it together. We need, I need to do the stuff that helps you out, and then you'll work well for me.
That's right. And I love the fact that you talked about how you are the CEO of the body and then you're finding a partner to help you. Now, you have to be very smart about who you're finding because you can find a partner that doesn't exactly work for you. So you have to be
Oh,
very
totally.
careful
I
on
even say,
that.
like, don't think of it as finding a partner. You're finding partners.
Right.
Like, don't give away your power to any one person in this process. Like,
Yeah.
find a few people that you can get different opinions from before taking action or even during the process, because
Right.
things will come up that you have questions about and whatever. And often it's not one person's answer that's really the answer.
Right.
There's you got to hear a few to hear, okay, like 3 out of the 4 of the people believe it's this, and that kind of makes sense to me, and my research confirms that, so
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm going to go with. But a lot of times just hearing one and then you go to the next person, it's wildly different.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
it's important not to just stop at one person.
For sure. So if somebody's listening to this and they're like, I have to find Adrienne, what do they do? How do they find you?
My website is getwellbe.com. So GETWELLBE. And Get WellBe is my, all the social channels. I'm active on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube channel. And I have a podcast also called the WellBe Podcast. You can just search Get WellBe to find that as well. And my newsletter is really the best place to engage with me, because that's kind of what I keep up with most, with all my original content every week. And yeah, that's the best place.
Awesome. And I'm going to have all of that information on the episode notes so everybody can go back in case they don't know how to spell it, which it's simple, but you never know.
Yes.
So I'll have all of that information on the episode notes. And I want to thank you so much for coming on. Your story is so inspiring. I know that you literally have gone through the trenches in order to come out empowered. And I find your story so inspiring because you kind of like, you rose above. You could have gone all kinds of different directions from your experience, especially with what you've lost, which I'm so sorry that of what you've experienced with your mother. Taking that and actually moving you towards the light and shedding a light to so many people is just amazing. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Those very sweet words. And I so appreciate you inviting me to tell my story and having me on to talk about some of the stuff I believe in and working on. So thank you.